Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, a webinar that will explain you how to cooperate with CEN and CENELEC to make a stronger standard, for Europe. We're organizing this webinar in cooperation with Aplia, Appliance Europe. My name is Els, and I will be moderating the webinar in the background. As usual, all participants are muted today, but you have the possibility to enter your questions in the Q&A panel. And the speakers will have a regular look at these questions and try to reply as many questions as possible. Should your question remain unreplied, please don't worry, because we intend to make a Q&A report available later on. The webinar is being recorded as well, so we will send you the recording and the presentation that will be used today. Should you be on Twitter, please don't hesitate to tweet about this webinar with the hashtag training for standards, and we are at Standards for EU, and so is Aplia. It's also on Twitter, of course. So without further ado, please let's go quickly over the agenda, because the speakers are waiting on the top of the chairs to start the presentations. I don't know if Deborah wants to say something about this before.
Putting me on the spot. Hi.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Sure, I'm very happy to be here today to speak to you about our CEN CENELEC Guide 25, which will be looking at all the cooperation categories that you have the possibility to collaborate CEN and or CENELEC with within our system. But first, I'll say a few words about the inclusiveness of our system. After that, I'll go more in details together with Wallace within our Guide 25. Why we started this webinar is because we revised the guide last year, so we wanted to share the few things that were clarified and updated. We also wanted to go into a deep dive of the different rights and obligations of our partners that cooperate with CEN and CENELEC. And then we have the pleasure to have Michael from Aplia, one of our partners, who will share his own experience as a long-lasting partner of CENELEC and liaison of CEN. And then we'll invite you to work together if it's not the case yet. If you want else, I continue. I can present again.
Yes. Thank you, Deborah. Please go ahead.
No problem. So you've heard about me already. My name is Deborah. I am from CEN CENELEC Management Center, and I'm taking care of policy and partnerships. So of course, Guide 25 about our cooperation partnership is very important to me. My colleague Wallace Rakkelboom is next to me, and she is working from the Standardization and Digital Solutions, and she is your liaison contact point. And again, we have our colleague Michael, who will say a little bit more about himself later, but I know he's ready for when his turn comes. He's the policy director at Aplia for the Digital and Competitiveness Department. Without further ado, I just wanted to start by presenting the joint CEN and CENELEC Strategy 2030 that really sets the goals and ambitions of CEN and CENELEC for the next decade. At this point, you might be very familiar with it, but I wanted to specifically look at Goal 3, increase the use and awareness of CEN and CENELEC deliverables, and Goal 4, CEN and CENELEC system to be the preferred choice for standardization in Europe. They're, of course, of particular interest today as they're both looking at standard users and standard makers, and because their success strongly depend on fruitful stakeholders collaboration and strong partnerships, which is what we'll be looking at today. Indeed, the uniqueness of the European standardization system is very much openness and inclusivity, and CEN CENELEC community and experts are very much the key driver to this machine. We're very much dedicated to developing high quality European standards that are fit for purpose, that respond to the needs of EU industry while meeting consumer, environmental, and other societal expectations. And in fact, that's only possible via strong cooperation with key stakeholders and by building long-lasting collaborative relationships with them. Whoops. And that's why, of course, CEN CENELEC and our members are fully committed to encouraging and supporting all sectors of society and industry to participate in our standardization work, and to cooperating with key organizations for the development of some partnership with those that can contribute to the fulfillment of our scope and our mission. For these partnerships, CEN and CENELEC consider the complementary roles that they can play at either national and or European level, very much reinforcing the national delegation principle by building strong partnerships with a wide range of key European stakeholders. And indeed, stakeholders engagement is very much key in our system. This is why you have 2 dedicated points in CEN CENELEC Management Center. You have tailored content on our CEN CENELEC website. You have specific projects under our Strategy 2030 implementation plan to not only further strengthen existing partnerships, but also foster new outreach. And I think that's also why you have the famous Guide 25 that we are going to be talking about today, which is very much dedicated to stakeholders engagement as well. CEN CENELEC Guide 25 provides the guidelines of CEN CENELEC policies towards building partnership with European organizations, associations, and other recognized stakeholders who have an interest in European standardization and are willing and able to provide added value knowledge and to actively contribute with inputs and proposals to CEN and CENELEC governing and or technical bodies. That's a bit vague right now, but you'll know more in a minute. What's important as a first step is to know that the guide is divided into 6 categories of cooperation that you can see on the screen right now, under which all of our cooperation fall, depending on whether it has a private or public nature of the organization, depending on its representativeness within the market and its area of interest. I did mention that we revised the guide last year in 2021. Why the revision? The revision was very much triggered by identified needs for further clarification of notably criteria defining the different categories of cooperation that I just presented, as well as other needs for updates based on several years of experience with the guide, application from organizations, et cetera, but Wallace will tell you more information in a minute. The revised guide, which is now the edition number 3, was approved by the CEN CENELEC General Assemblies in November 2021. And I think, because I've seen in the participants that we have a few of our already ongoing and existing cooperating partners, please know that it is the revised guide does not affect any ongoing cooperation agreements. So it was very much looking at any future collaborations. Now you've heard enough about me. Wallace, please take it over to highlight the main changes of the revision.
Thank you, Deborah. So in terms of main changes, we first clarified the concept partnership versus cooperation. The guide used to be called the concept of partnership, which often led to confusion as the category 1 in the guide, which Deborah will explain in a bit, is called partners. We therefore exchanged the general wording of the guide to cooperation to avoid confusion between the two. Then we also revised some of the procedures and conditions in the different categories in order to for them to be in line with our revised internal rules and regulations. One of the biggest changes was the clarification of category 6, other corporations, which was a category that seemed to bring up a lot of confusion from our external stakeholders and was left often open to interpretation. We tried to define this category in the most specific way possible, but I will come back on this on the next slide. And then we finally revised for gender inclusive language, did an overall health check on the document, and updated the links in the guide when necessary. So before we proceed with explaining the different categories that fall under Guide 25, I want to highlight the changes that were made in category 6, as those were some of the biggest updates that were made in Guide 25. Before the guide was updated, the category 6 was left open to organizations not falling into the other categories without much explanation about it. So there seemed to be too much room for interpretation for this category, left a lot of confusion regarding who could apply, how they could apply, what the rules and regulations were, etc. So we therefore decided to specify this category the best way we could to avoid future confusion. You can see, for example, in the text here on the slide in blue, how we updated the wording of this category. I will come back to explain this category more in depth a bit later on when we discuss the rights and obligations of each category though. So now that we have explained the main changes made to Guide 25, we will now describe the rights of cooperating stakeholders in CEN and CENELEC work by explaining the different categories that fall under Guide 25. So as Deborah said earlier, there are 6 categories of cooperating stakeholders, but I will leave Deborah, the floor to Deborah now to explain category 1.
Thank you, Wallace. I think my camera turned off for some reason. It's me again. So indeed, the first category is the partner organization within which Aplia, but also Orgalim falls, T&D Europe, MedTech Europe. Currently, we have several partners under that category. So 10 with CEN and 12 with CENELEC. Some of them are partners of both. The first thing that you will find in the Guide 25 is the different criteria of the type of organization that can apply for that status. So to make it simple, I've summarized it as any independent European or international European-based pan-sectoral or sectoral organization that is very much able to represent a very significant part of the European interest groups related to its defined area of competence or sector, and to provide relevant inputs to CEN and CENELEC work. More details in the guide. I think what's very much important and important to know for you is that as a partner organization of CEN and or CENELEC, you are offered participation in 2 main areas in which you can actively provide inputs and get value back. The first area is the strategic and policy cooperation. So it's looking very much at providing you the rights to participate in our governing bodies and their working or advisory groups, such as you get an observership in the General Assembly, in the advisory group of the General Assembly and of the Presidential Committee, according to their terms of reference. You also have an observership in CEN and or CENELEC technical boards. So the aim of that first stream of cooperation is to increase, of course, the competitiveness of the European industry and to contribute to the welfare of European society. The second tier of cooperation is looking at the technical cooperation. So it's providing you rights to participate in our technical committees, subcommittees, working groups, and other technical groups as defined within our internal regulations. There, we're very much looking to ensure high quality and consensus-based technical deliverables. I'm not going to go too much into details of your right within the technical level, because in fact, the rights of partners at technical level are very similar to liaisons, which is category 2 defined in the guide and which will be presented in the next slide. I'll come back to it. It is true that partners that participate at technical level do have extra rights as compared to a liaison participating in technical level. One of them is the last one of the slide, is actually the right to provide comment at European level during the inquiry stage. And the last thing I wanted to highlight on this is that all of our partnership with the so-called Annex 3 organizations, either representing civil society or SMEs, and that have signed a partnership with CEN and or CENELEC, fall under category 1, but there is a dedicated webinar on the topic available online. I've linked it in the last slide of this presentation, so I will not go into too much detail because today we're looking at industry mainly. Wallace, I've introduced category 2. Can you tell me more?
Indeed, thank you. I am here at CEN CENELEC Management Center. I'm in charge of the liaison organization, as it falls more into the technical standardization activities. So if your organization seeks to purely participate to the technical activities of a technical committee, opting for a liaison cooperation might be the right fit for you. So the status of liaison organizations is offered to those European organizations, including foreign consortia, representing interest groups that are committed to provide input to the work of one or more CEN or CENELEC technical bodies. The liaison is expected to provide high quality added value expertise in a defined technical field. So the status of liaison organization may also be valuable when collaboration between an existing technical committee and a funded European research project is envisaged. In such cases, the liaison organization status may just be granted for the duration of the research project. The organization requesting to participate in a technical body is granted the status upon approval of the concerned TC. To date, CEN cooperates with approximately 286 liaison organizations and CENELEC with approximately 28 liaison organizations. Then the liaison organization has access to the technical committees and working groups, working documents, and participates to the meetings without voting rights. They can propose technical documents with a view of their possible conversion into CEN and or CENELEC deliverables, introduce preparatory work as a support to ongoing standardization activities. They can submit technical contribution and formulate advice on current and future standard programs. But liaison organization and actually also partner organizations have to ensure that the technical inputs provided by their representatives in the technical bodies represent the consensus view of their members and stakeholders. I will leave Deborah go to category 3. I'm not going to go into details about the whole procedure, but you can always send me or Deborah an email and we can get you started, but we'll get to that later.
Thank you very much, Wallace. I'm taking the micro back. So this is slide is, I think, very useful, especially for those of you I saw in the participants list that are actually already experts in some of our TCs, subcommittees, or working groups, because it very much summarizes the rights at technical level to participate in our technical work, having access to documents, and the right to comment at European level of partners, so category 1 versus liaisons category 2 that Wallace just presented. As I said before, but I'll repeat it, you can very much see it clearly here. The main difference is that partners have the right to submit comments at inquiry stage, whereas for the final vote, partners have to go through the national members of CEN and or CENELEC, which is also the case for liaisons and any other stakeholders in the overall European standardization system. Of course, partners also have, in addition to this technical cooperation, the right to participate in strategic and policy discussions, but that's not reflected on this slide. Again, for the experts that are listening to us today, if you're participating in a TC, a subcommittee, or a working group, I think it's also a good opportunity to remind and remember the different status of partners and liaisons that they have between their participation in a TC or a subcommittee level versus a working group level, which at TC level, they have an observer status. That means no voting right. And I saw in the Q&A that there's already a question, what does it mean, no voting right? So I'll get back to that in a second. Whereas at the working group level, they have exactly the same rights as any other expert around the table of the working group. So I think that's a confusion that some of our technical body officers sometimes have. So it's good to remember. So now off the road, what does no voting right means? In CEN and CENELEC system, only CEN members and CENELEC members, which are the national standardization bodies and the national electoral technical committees, have the right to vote. So that is what it means with no voting right. As I said before, but I think it's very important to repeat as it reflects the core of our system. The partnerships, be it a partner of category 1 or a liaison category 2, are very much developed, taking into account the complementary role and the different levels at which such cooperation may take place, so be it at national and or European level. Therefore, partnerships developed under Guide 25 are considered complementary to the national delegation principle and do not remove the need for the members of the partner or liaison organization to participate in the work at national level via our CEN and CENELEC members. I think to conclude that first part of our presentation, very much looking at category 1 and category 2, I already invite you, in fact, to contact Wallace or myself for more information if you have any questions, or if you're interested in applying for the liaison or partner status. Please send your request to partners@cencenelec.eu, but the email will be also reflected later on the slide. Category 3 defined in Guide 25 is for associated bodies. It's a very specific category, and in fact, categories 3, 4, and 5, which I will present also in a second, are very specific, but we do wanted to mention all of the categories represented in the guide, although it did not really apply to the targeted stakeholders of today. Category 3 is open to identified European organizations that have recognized technical expertise in a specific field. And the specificity here is that they are willing and able to provide preparatory standardization work on a systematic and organized basis to then be further introduced into the CEN and or CENELEC standard making process and the usual process, I would say. So it's a very case-by-case basis, and it's actually currently only applied to one associated body that has signed a Category 3 agreement with CEN, and it is ASD STAN in the space sector. Category 4 is for European councillors, and Category 5, European institutional stakeholders. Again, doesn't really concern you, but like that, we cover all the categories in the guide. Considering that the CEN and CENELEC missions and contribution to the objective of the European single market and the recognized strategic value of standards for achieving policy priorities, it is of importance to ensure smooth cooperation with the relevant European institutions. Category 4 allows us to ensure such smooth cooperation with the European Commission and EFTA, and Category 5 allows us to ensure such cooperation with all the European Commission's agencies, research services, and any other European intergovernmental organizations. And of course, for both, they have very particular cooperation rights. To give you an example, in the Category 5, we currently have 6 CEN European institutional stakeholders and 5 CENELEC European institutional stakeholders. For example, the Joint Research Center, ENISA for cybersecurity, and I think the most recent one was the Shift to Rail joint undertaking. I've talked a lot. Wallace, tell us more about Category 6, please.
Yes, so as I mentioned earlier, when discussing the changes made in Guide 25 regarding Category 6, in few specific and exceptional cases, when the organization or the nature of the partnership does not fall under any of the above indicated categories, CEN or CENELEC may conclude specific cooperation agreements on a case-by-case basis. So from now on, after the changes we made in Guide 25, only through a prior assessment done on our part here at the CEN CENELEC Management Center, where we assess that the organization cannot fall under any other category, and also after verifying that there is indeed a bilateral desire and commitments from both organizations to cooperate on both technical and strategic matters, CEN and or CENELEC may consider negotiating specific cooperation agreements on a case-by-case basis. We currently have 18 CEN and 19 CENELEC Category 6 agreements. The rights and obligations are discussed on an ad hoc basis because it's depending on the bilateral interest and needs in cooperation. An example of a Category 6 cooperation is, for example, the European Cooperation for Accreditation.
Thank you so much. And I see that there's a few questions already in the Q&A. We'll come back to that after at the very end of the webinar, but feel free to continue to send them. Again, I feel like we've talked a lot, so I'm very happy to welcome Michael, who will bring a little bit of variety in the voices today and also in the perspective. Thank you so much for joining us today and having listened to Wallace and I for a moment now. So Michael, I invited you today to share the experience of Aplia as a close partner of CENELEC. highlight some success stories, maybe that you've had in so long with us, and present the benefits of our collaboration for your network. I thought it was always nicer to hear directly from the source. But first, Michael, could you present Aplia and tell us more about your activities?
Yes, thanks, Deborah. Thanks to CEN CENELEC for inviting Aplia and me to be together with you today. I do hope that you can hear me and see me clear. I'm policy director in Aplia, and my role, among others, is the cooperation with CEN CENELEC Management Center in the participating in BT and this kind of things. As Aplia, for those who do not know us, we represent the household appliance industry in Europe. That's important when we say in Europe, because we have also non-European organizations as members, but then we represent their interest in Europe only. We promote innovative, sustainable policies and solutions and contribute to the European GDP and investing in research and development, creating plenty of jobs in the European Union. Next one, please. Yeah, here you have some highlights with the key figures. Nearly 1 million people employed directly and indirectly in Europe. This number of euros invested in R&D, and that's really in the European Union, and direct and indirect value added to the GDP of the European Union. Next one. Here you have not to show off, but just to bring you also to the down to earth and to your houses. Here you have the direct members of Aplia. So I'm sure that you can pick plenty of those names and assign them to the products that you have back at home. And I do hope that you enjoy using them on the daily basis. And then we have kind of dual membership, so direct members and the network of national organizations, those marked here in those blue dots are basically specifying which are the national members. The green parts, as you can see, are places where we don't have members. So as you can see, it's very few among the European Union. We have almost presence everywhere. The next one, this is also a kind of international cooperation that we have within the IRMA, so-called International Roundtable of Household Appliance Manufacturers, where we cooperate with US, Canada, Korea, China, Japan, etc., and then discuss the elements on the global level. And next one, yeah, that would be all in a nutshell about Aplia itself and about myself. And now I think we can have a bit of more discussion about the partnership that Aplia has and enjoys for years with CEN CENELEC.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Michael. You said not to show off. I think you can show off. It's a very impressive membership that Aplia has. I think from the get-go, I want to know more about the role that standards play in your sector. If you can share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so obviously it's not that we do cooperate with CEN CENELEC and we invest in standard making process for nothing. We find standards as a kind of great tool to comply with the legislation. So we have been and we are constantly a very big supporter of the new approach, new legislative framework, where the essential requirements are defined in the law, and then the way how to meet those requirements are defined in the European standards. And then, of course, it's great that there are the European standards developed as such, but it's even better when those standards are timely listed in the official journal of the European Union under respective regulations, because then members can use and benefit from the presumption of conformity when placing their products on the market. That's much easier when placing the products on the market. What I would like to emphasize here it's beneficial for the industry, but in our opinion, it's extremely beneficial also for the market surveillance authorities and the way how they can control the market. And we've been like advocating for that for years, that products needs to be taken from the market, tested, etc. So when the market surveillance authorities have the standards listed in the OJ, it's much easier for them to do their job. So that's why we invest in the standard making process, sending our experts from the members companies to sit directly in the technical committees. We do invest that from the secretariat side to participate in the strategic meetings of the CEN CENELEC, developing the policies, together commenting on certain new pieces of legislation and the best way to meet the requirements. And one last thing, maybe in this context, is the element that is very often forgotten, but we always underline it, that still standards, even if they are listed in the official journal of the European Union, they fully remain voluntary. And we absolutely enjoy this approach, and we would like this to be kept like this. Even if probably 95% of the harmonized standards are being then used by the manufacturers, by the authorities, etc., we still claim and we still want and enjoy them being the voluntary. So anyone has always the possibility to use anything else.
Thank you so much for this very comprehensive answer. I have something much lighter to follow up. So when I was preparing our conversation, I kind of went digged into our archives of contracts. So Aplia has been a partner of CENELEC category 1 that we just presented since 2013, when Aplia was still called CECET at that time. Aplia is also a liaison of CEN, so that's a category 2 type. Absolutely. Under Guide 25. And I found that the first liaison agreement between Aplia and CEN, so CECET and CEN, dated back from 1999. I will not tell you how young as what I was then. And could you guess what CEN-TC this was?
That's funny, because I would be exactly guessing. I'm maybe not that young as you, Deborah, but in 1999 I was graduating from my high school, so I can confess to you that I haven't had a clue about the CEN CENELEC, about the CECET at that time, and about the European standards probably. But if I'm to guess, I would probably, my first guess would be the CEN TC49 gas cooking appliances. If that's not the right guess, then the second guess would be TC61 CENELEC and the safety of household appliances. But it's possible that I'm wrong in both cases. So what's the correct answer?
Your first gut instinct. CEN TC49 was absolutely correct. Gas cooking appliances, and Aplia is still a liaison in that TC. So I wish I could give you a chocolate or something, but chocolate for you, Miguel. Very good. So now I'm gonna talk a little bit more about the practicalities of our cooperation. So as I've tried to explain, all of our partners, category 1 partners, have this sort of dual cooperation at 2 different levels. So Aplia is invited to participate both at policy and strategic discussions on the one hand, but also in our technical work. So I want to know, how has this long-lasting, that we've established, very long-lasting cooperation benefited your stakeholders? What is the most important added value for Aplia and your members of participating not only at technical, but also at policy and strategic level?
Yes, so definitely, I think that there's a right assumption that I think both sides benefited from this cooperation. Otherwise, I guess it wouldn't last. It wouldn't last that long. So that's the first, I think, thing that we should and can easily agree on. When I presented Aplia, I gave you the overview of the direct members and national associations, and it was not without a reason. Because we have this kind of dual membership, and also in terms of cooperating with CEN CENELEC. we have the technical expertise coming from the member companies or sometimes from the national associations and sitting directly in the technical committees and on the local level, on the country level, and then also contributing as the technical national technical committee to the work of the technical committee on the European level. And that's, I think, the work that is very much appreciated by, again, as I said, by both times, but by both sides, sorry. But we have also this kind of more a bit strategic or a political cooperation where more myself and the secretariat is involved. And by this, I mean here the participation in the technical boards of CEN CENELEC and joint ones from Aplia side contributing to the discussions there, and also like discussing together formally and informally any of the new proposals coming up from the European Commission and shaping the European standardization system. Recently, probably most of you or all of you heard about the standardization strategy published in February by the European Commission, and then we have already had a couple of discussions with CEN CENELEC assessing the future of this, assessing how it can be used to streamline the processes, to improve the workflow, to also speed up the listing of the standards in the official journal, etc. So with this, I believe it gives you kind of feeling or a flavor of how the good cooperation can look like. We may sometimes we may disagree with the assessment of certain proposal, with the way forward, etc. But the thing that I really also personally appreciate is the possibility to exchange the views, to exchange the comments, give input, and having the kind of like open channel of communication whenever it's needed. So if any of you is like wondering whether it makes sense to join, to become a partner with CEN CENELEC, then definitely I would say yes, that makes sense, and that brings you benefits both on the technical and strategic level.
That is why I wanted you to come. You're doing the job for me, so that's perfect. Thank you so much. I've already seen a question for you, but it relates more. It's a mix between technical and strategic cooperation, so I'll keep it for right after. But for now, again, you just mentioned the European standardization strategy, so I'm assuming this will come back in your answer. Yeah. As a partner of CENELEC, we have regular exchanges between Aplia and CENELEC on our respective priorities on topic of common interest. So this is a good opportunity to have that exchange with you and kind of ask you, what would you say are Applia's top 3 priorities for 2022 in relation to standardization?
Perfect. That will also indirectly respond to the question of Giovanna that has been posted on the Q&A, but I'm happy to elaborate on that later on as well. But if I'm to list the top priorities for this year, I would first say improving the process of listing of standards with the great help of CEN CENELEC Management Center, so that they are listed timely, without unreasonable delay, and the problems are solved. Then the next thing that I think we could do together when working with CEN CENELEC, and we are actually discussing that already. Probably many of you heard that right now in the plenty of proposals, the Commission is proposing the path of the implementing acts and the technical specifications instead of standard making process as a kind of alternative in case something goes wrong with the standard making process. So what I think we need to do, and we are doing already, is to explain and to show the Commission that this should be used only as a kind of last resort when really we do not do our job. And it shouldn't be used as a kind of alternative path, but only in case of something goes wrong. So that's the second objective of Aplia, is to make sure that it's not somehow overused, if I may say like this, by the Commission, but the traditional and well-established standard making process by CEN CENELEC, with the participation of all respective stakeholders, is preserved. And the third thing, probably also related to the mentioned standardization strategy, would be the channeling some modifications to the standardization regulation 1025 that could improve certain elements. And then I can tell you that in Aplia opinion, for instance, one of the things that could be, we believe, quite easily improved is to add or give certain deadlines for every stakeholder, for every institutions mentioned in the standardization regulation, the deadline to respond to anything, for instance, to the formal objections or anything like this. So that would definitely speed up the process and streamline the initiatives. I'm not 100% sure whether all those three top priorities would be able to be, first of all, solved. Second, if they will be limited only to the 2022, but I definitely see them as the key elements that will be with us this year in the various discussions and various activities that we would have together with CEN CENELEC.
Well, I was just going to say this is for 2022, but also CEN CENELEC, together with an active participation and inputs from Aplia, have been working on those several topics for several years, especially timely citation and everything surrounding the process to harmonization of the standardization system. So it is the to-do list for 2022, but it has been on our to-do list for a long time as well. I've talked about the past and how we started our collaboration. Maybe it's important to say that today Aplia actually participates in 4 CENELEC TCs, 2 CEN TCs, as well as 3 joint CEN and CENELEC TCs. TCs standing for technical committees, for those who are not yet familiar with all of our acronyms, where you have the right to comment on draft standards at inquiry stage. You have the right to sit in all the working groups and participate as experts. In the TC, you have the right of observership. So I was wondering if you have any success story or success stories that you could share with me and with all of us today, where your direct involvement at European level in a TC or a working group has made a European standardization deliverable fitter for purpose for your sector.
Yes, definitely. I don't want to show off neither from Aplia side nor from CEN CENELEC side, but I think the biggest overall success story is the fact that, to a large extent, we do not hear about the major accidents involving household appliances on the European level. That's, I believe, thanks to the development of the good standards and to bring modifications when there are problems mentioned. So I think that's the overall biggest success stories. If I am to mention something more precise, something that comes to my mind, it's already a couple of years old, but I remember discussing the early years of my presence in CSET at that time, the so-called topic of the Cooktop Fires. And then we were discussing in the standardization level, what could be the reason for that, what is causing that, etc. In Aplia and overall in the technical committees, we are always trying to kind of find the root cause of the problems, of the accidents. So we are not trying to address the problem not knowing what's going on. So this issue of the Cooktop Fires was that there were a surprising number of fires notified mainly in the Scandinavian countries. And then it was digged a bit more, and then it was discovered that in a majority of cases there were unfortunately drunk people who were like coming back home, turning on their cooktops and forgetting about them, and then there was a fire. So with this, there was effective technical solutions find out to. I will not go into the details of technicalities, but it was definitely found out and appreciated by the market surveillance authorities, NGOs, and everyone that would at the early stage or immediately turn off the appliance and suppress the fire in case it starts. So I think to me that's a very good example of the kind of success stories. At least myself, I haven't heard about more accidents in this respect at all. And maybe last thing, not to make it too long, is I would say overall improvements of the standards, especially I would say in TC 61, so the safety of household appliances, because that's very important. In Aplia, we treat it absolutely seriously, and no compromise on that. Product needs to be safe, full stop. And with the help of the European standards and strong involvement of Aplia and its members in the CENELEC TC61 and good cooperation also with the IEC TC61, I believe we managed to a large extent to achieve that. We may of course say that in some cases, as Giovanna in her question pointed out, we are still struggling with the listing of the harmonized standards. But as I said, I believe that the cooperation and discussion we had with, or we have constantly with the CEN CENELEC Management Center and with the Commission, they are in the longer term bringing us there and would streamline the listing of standards. Also, if we successfyeah fulfill those top priorities that I mentioned in my statements earlier. So yeah, overall, I think that the whole cooperation between CEN CENELEC and Aplia could be described as a kind of success story with a kind of perspective for future, I would say.
I don't even want to add anything because that was such a good way to to end it. I just want to bounce back. You mentioned in your example of the cooktop, which thank you for sharing it. I think it was a very good illustration of why it matters to be involved at all the levels of standardization. You've mentioned that it was very beneficial, of course, for industry, but also NGOs, market surveillance authorities, etc. I think it's a very good door for me to remind that the Guide 25 and the partnerships under it is very much open. Today we focused more on industry because we were doing this together with you, but it's very much open to any European organizations, associations, or any type of stakeholders that have an interest in participating in our work. We have, as I said, a specific partnership with the so-called Annex 3 organizations that are NGOs, in fact, taking care of environmental interests within the standardization activities, consumers' interest, trade unions' interest, and SMEs as well. So that was a good way for me to do this. I don't know if you want to add anything, Michael, that we haven't really covered and that you wish to highlight.
Maybe this what you mentioned as the last element. Yeah, the workshop is today organized on the basis of the example of cooperation with the industry, but as you pointed out, there are plenty of other stakeholders working together with us in the TCs, both on the European and national level, just to name like ANEC or ECOS, where we appreciate their input, their comments. We don't always agree with each other, but that's not the point. the point is that we meet in the TC work, we discuss, we exchange the opinions and try to find the good solutions for the benefit of the system and the European organizations. And maybe I don't know if I think I to a large extent responded to the question of Giovanna. So just to maybe wrap up and summarize, yeah, we see the problems still existing, but with the solutions that I mentioned, the priorities, the standardization strategy, amendments to the regulation, etc., we do believe that they will be solved. There is also a question, I can take it if you don't mind, Deborah, yes, immediately from Charles Whitlock about the resources of Applia and the test lab. So we do have a, like I would say, modest secretariat here in Brussels with 13 colleagues working on different fields of safety, energy, eco-design, waste of products, circular economy, and this kind of things. We do have a network of members and, as I mentioned, technical experts participating in the standard making process. And to respond directly, we don't have any testing laboratories owned, certified, or anything like this by Applia. But of course, we do cooperate depending on the needs with plenty of the mainly European laboratories where they do the respective testing of our products. Just to give you an example, when it comes to the a modification of the, for instance, performance standards or performance legislation, where we do so-called ring tests, where the products are being shipped between the laboratories to compare the results and to find out whether the methodology designed in the standards and in the law is responding to the needs. So we don't have any test laboratories, but we do cooperate with many of them depending on the needs.
I find the question interesting because it's the case for Aplia and for several of our partners. We always assume, based on the output that you give and the active participation within our system, that you're like 25, 30 people, and then we realize that you said you're 13 part of your staff, but of course that goes to illustrate the importance of your next network and your expert across your system. So that's quite interesting. I think we've reached the end of this section. So thank you so much, Michael. Don't go too far, because I will now say a few words to conclude, and then we'll look at the few questions that haven't been answered yet, if time allows. So that's also my call to all of you to send your last minute questions if you have. Thank you so much again, Michael, for your time and your expertise and our overall effective and friendly cooperation for so long. Thank you so much for this. So this is very much the end of the section, and my last opportunity to invite you to reach out today if you have any question for Wallace and myself, if you wish to apply for a liaison or partner status. I think now you have all printed in your minds the right email address in front of you. I've also put on the slide a few useful links. Of course, you'll receive the slides at the end, like my colleague Els said. A direct page dedicated to CEN and CENELEC European stakeholders. If you want to have a look, and I think that was one of the questions that I saw, if you want to have a look at the type of cooperation we already have under Guide 25 at CEN and CENELEC level, it's also linked on the slide. Of course, the famous CEN CENELEC Guide 25, which now, Michael, you're also an expert of, and the third edition is available on the website as well. And I had also mentioned the webinar specifically for societal stakeholders and SMEs involvement in our group, and that is also linked here as slides and recordings. So now I will move to the remaining questions. I'll just go for it, and Wallace, or Michael, if you want to add anything, if you see fit, let me know. I see Bernd question CEN and CENELEC strategy about Chinese standardization activities, which is in fact linked to also Frank's question. Could you please give some concrete example for each category that we will give in a second, but the second part of Frank's question, which is about Brexit, UK, Russia, Belarus, context and partnerships with those. In fact, unfortunately, my answer is this is not under the scope of Guide 25. Guide 25 is very much looking at European stakeholders and partnerships with European organizations. But maybe Wallace, you can put in the chat the email address of my colleagues who do have cooperation with international stakeholders such as China, etc., etc. So you can definitely pop your specific questions there. Unfortunately, I'm not the expert for that, so I will not risk it. The first part of your question, Frank, could you please give some concrete example for each category? Of course, again, it's available on the website, but I'm happy to give you a little taste. Category 1, no surprise here, Aplia, European organization taking care of household appliances, but also Ergolim, T&D Europe, MedTech Europe, Euroalarm, and whatnot. EDSO as well, just coming in my head. Category 2, liaisons. Well, Wallace gave a very impressive numbers of the overall liaisons that we have between CEN and CENELEC. So Aplia would be also a very, very easy answer, but we have also liaison with Aluminium Europe, with Construction Products Europe, and several European organizations in a few sectors. I don't know if you have a little one that you want to mention, Wallace, as well.
Oh, we have so many. We also have a lot with the European research projects, currently recently signed the strategy project. There's so many. ACE, UIP, Eurostruct, Sesamo.
It's very hard to choose from all the possibilities. Yes.
Only.
Yes, yeah, and then we have another impressive number for CENELEC. Category 3, ASD stand, as I said, it's a very specific category, so we only have one partnership at CEN level. Category 4 is, of course, European Commission and EFTA only, so those are easy. Category 5 is all the European agencies and research centers, etc. So I mentioned in the past ENISA, for example, for cybersecurity. There's also Frontex, the joint initiative on railway as well, and many others. Under category 6, I think, Wallace, you mentioned EA, which is the European Accreditation Organization. Under there, we also have a partnership with ITU, but also IFAN, which is the International Federation for Standard Users, etc., etc. So I think this is giving you a lot of answer, but if you want to have the complete answer, Frank, you can go on our website and have a look. And if you have any question onto whether it applies to your organization, I don't know where you're from, but again, we're very happy to answer to any of your questions. And Frank, again, you had another question. You're very active today about the links with ISO. Well, again, it's a very interesting question. It's a question that requires a lot of answer. That's why we have actually dedicated webinars on our cooperation with ISO, between CEN and ISO on the one hand, but also between CENELEC and IC on the other hand. You may know that we have specific agreements between CEN and ISO. It's called the Vienna Agreement. And between CENELEC and IC, we have the Frankfurt Agreement, which allow us to cooperate in this vertical way. Of course, international standardization is of utmost importance for us. And I was mentioning standardization, our strategy 2030 at the very beginning. If you remember, Goal 5 was actually dedicated to international cooperation. So again, I'm kind of chickening out and not gonna give you too much answer because ISO and IC are not covered by our Guide 25 and they have specific partnership agreements. And oh my God, the perfect timing, because it's 10:30 and I don't see any new questions. And you will receive, again, this is my last slide to remind you that you will receive the slides afterwards. You will also receive all the email addresses that I've mentioned for international cooperation, for research and innovation, for ISO and IC contact points, etc., etc. It's also a save the date for you. Our next workshop is on interoperability of security, and it's held in almost a month, 21st of April. The link is also there if you want to register. And then keep that on your radar. We'll have a workshop organized by our sector forum on personal protective equipment, which can become smart PPE standardization for design and use. And I've talked way too much. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you specifically, Michael, for your time and inputs. So appreciated.
Thanks, my pleasure.
Thank you so much. And to everyone, have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.